It all started with a single growl, not loud, but low, rumbling from deep in Shadow's chest, the kind of sound that makes your skin crawl before you even understand why. Officer Dwayne didn't notice it at first. He was focused on the suspect. Ahead, a man cornered in a warehouse raid. Gun drawn, voice firm, he shouted, "Hands up, now!" Shadow, the department's most trusted K9, stood by his side, muscles tight, eyes locked. But something was off. He wasn't looking at the suspect. He was staring at Dwayne. Dwayne glanced down, confused. "What's wrong with you, boy?" he muttered under his breath. Then, without warning, Shadow growled louder and lunged. Not at the suspect, but at Dwayne. Gasps echoed. Officers behind them froze. One shouted, "Shadow! No!" But Shadow wasn't biting to injure. He pushed Dwayne hard, knocking him backward, pinning him with his weight. His teeth snapped inches from Dwayne's neck but never touched him. "Get this dog off me!" Dwayne screamed, twisting beneath him. "He's lost it!" But Shadow didn't move. Sergeant Lopez ran over, grabbing Shadow's harness. "Heel! Shadow, heel!" Only then did Shadow step back, slowly, never taking his eyes off Dwayne. Everyone stood in shock. The suspect, still against the wall, had his hands up, trembling. No one moved to cuff him. All eyes were on Shadow. Dwayne stumbled to his feet, brushing off his uniform. "That mutt's done. He's off the force." Shadow stood still, silent, chest heaving. Sergeant Lopez looked at Dwayne. "That wasn't an accident. Shadow's trained. He knows friend from threat." "What are you saying?" Dwayne snapped. "I'm saying something spooked him," Lopez said quietly. "Something in you." The warehouse fell into silence. Even the suspect whispered, "The dog saved me." Dwayne turned on him. "Saved you? You're a criminal." The man's voice trembled. "I was forced here. I tried to run last week. Your officer, he said if I did, I'd disappear." Everyone stared. "You calling me dirty?" Dwayne barked. But the suspect kept talking. "He warned me. Said no one would find my body, but the dog kept growling at him. I think he knew." Shadow let out a soft whine, stepping forward, tail low but steady. Officer Madison, who had been quiet until now, stepped between them. "Let's all calm down. We'll review the body cams." Dwayne scoffed. "That dog's faulty, dangerous." Shadow's ears dropped. He looked from face to face, confused, scared, but certain. Madison crouched beside him, whispering, "You were trying to tell us, weren't you?" Shadow gently pressed his nose to her hand. Lopez sighed. "We need to figure this out. For now, Shadow's off duty. And Dwayne, we'll talk." Dwayne stormed off without another word. Shadow stood still, his eyes fixed on Dwayne's back until he vanished out the warehouse doors. Everyone thought it was over. A glitch. A one-time incident. But Shadow knew the truth. And what he had just done was only the beginning. Because some dogs don't bark for no reason. And when a dog turns on his own partner, it's never without a reason. What none of them knew then was that Shadow had just saved a life. And soon, he'd be saving many more. Before that night at the warehouse, if you asked anyone at the precinct about Officer Dwayne and Shadow, they'd say the same thing. They're the best we've got. For years, the two had been side by side. Dwayne was tough, disciplined, and always first through the door during raids. Shadow was just as sharp, an all-black German shepherd with piercing amber eyes and instincts no amount of training could teach. He wasn't just Dwayne's partner, he was his pride. People admired them. "They move like one mind," Officer Madison used to say. "It's like the dog can read Dwayne's thoughts." At community events, kids would run up to pet Shadow, and Dwayne would proudly boast, "He can sniff out a weapon in under 5 seconds. Saved my life more times than I can count." And it was true. On paper, they were a dream team. But no one ever asked how Dwayne treated Shadow when the crowds weren't around. In private, Dwayne was strict. Maybe too strict. He didn't believe in coddling animals. "They're tools," he once told a rookie, "not pets. You baby a dog and it won't bite when it needs to." Shadow never disobeyed, never barked out of turn. He followed commands, like clockwork. But when no one was looking, there was a different energy in his eyes. A quiet tension, like he was always bracing for something. At home, Dwayne kept Shadow in a kennel in the garage. "He needs to stay sharp," he told his neighbors. Sleeping on beds makes dogs soft. Shadow didn't whimper, didn't bark, but the loneliness seeped into him. Late at night, when Dwayne's lights went off and silence took over the house, Shadow would stare at the door. Just stare, like he was waiting for something that never came. But to everyone else, they were the perfect unit. Dwayne won awards. Shadow earned medals. Local news did a segment once, calling them heroes in Cell. Blue and fur. It all looked perfect, until small things started to crack that image. On one raid, Shadow hesitated before going into a room. Just a second. Dwayne yanked his collar hard and growled, "Move, mutt! Don't make me drag you!" Another time, Shadow barked at a man Dwayne had already arrested. A quick kick to the ribs made Shadow yelp, only once, but it made Officer Madison's head snap around. "Did you just?" she asked. "Dog was out of line," Dwayne said flatly. "You gotta keep them disciplined." That moment stuck with her. She never forgot the sound of Shadow's whimper. One evening, after hours, Lopez walked past the garage and heard something strange, a soft, whining noise. Curious, he peeked through the window and saw Shadow curled in a corner of his kennel, breathing fast, eyes wide open. "Is he okay?" Lopez asked the next day. Dwayne shrugged. "He's a dog. He'll deal." That night, Shadow had a nightmare. His paws twitched, and he let out small barks in his sleep. In his dreams there was shouting, flashing lights, and something worse. Something Shadow couldn't name, but he felt it. A darkness behind the badge. Still, he showed up every morning, alert and ready. Still, he obeyed. Still, he trusted Dwayne, even when it hurt. But dogs notice what people don't. The way someone's tone shifts when no one else is listening. The way a hand lingers too long in anger. The way the air tightens with lies. Shadow started noticing. When Dwayne laughed too, loud after a suspect was roughed up. When he shoved a man down harder than necessary. When he whispered to a rookie, make it look like he resisted. Shadow saw it all. Smelled it. Felt it. But he was a dog. He couldn't speak. He could only wait. One day, during a patrol, they passed a small park. A little girl dropped her toy bear in front of Shadow and smiled. "Hi, doggy," she giggled. Shadow leaned toward her, tail wagging. But Dwayne yanked the leash. "Back!" he snapped. "Ignore her." The girl flinched. Shadow looked back, confused. The kindness in her eyes. He wanted to stay there, just for a moment longer. But Dwayne didn't. Allow softness. Not even for a second. Back at the station, Officer Madison sighed. "Sometimes I wonder how that dog stays so loyal." Lopez nodded. Dogs don't fake loyalty, but they don't forget pain either. And slowly, something in Shadow was starting to change. He was still obedient, still brave, still the department's best, but deep inside, a seed of doubt was growing, because for the first time, he was starting to wonder if the man he trusted most wasn't who he thought he was, and that seed, buried deep in silence, would one day explode, just like it did in the warehouse. Shadow still followed orders, still kept pace, still looked every bit the loyal canine. But something had shifted. A part of him was no longer fully present, like a thread had come loose inside him. The warehouse night stayed with him, like a shadow he couldn't shake. At first, it was little things. During drills, he started hesitating. Just a second or two, barely noticeable to most, but not to Dwayne. "Shadow, move," he barked during one training run. The dog didn't flinch. He moved, just slower than usual. The other officers brushed it off. Dwayne didn't. After the session, he stood over Shadow. "What's gotten into you?" he hissed. "Don't make me look bad out." There, Shadow's ears lowered. He didn't whine, but something in his eyes was different, quieter, distant. Then came the incident during the traffic stop. A nervous driver stepped out of his car too fast, and Shadow gave a low, warning growl. Dwayne snapped the leash hard. "Shut it," he muttered under his breath. Lopez, standing nearby, frowned. He was just doing his job. Dwayne didn't even look over. He doesn't get to decide what's a threat. It was happening more often now. Shadow would alert during random walks. Dwayne ignored it. Sometimes he would tug the leash harder than needed. Once he yanked Shadow back so fast the dog stumbled. At the precinct, Madison watched from a distance. "You notice anything weird with Shadow lately?" she asked Lopez. He's quieter. Not in a calm way, Lopez said. Like, he's thinking too much. Dogs don't think, Dwayne cut in sharply, overhearing. They react. He's just getting lazy. But Shadow wasn't lazy. He was paying attention. More than ever. He started sniffing around Dwayne's locker. Once, when Dwayne wasn't looking, Shadow stared at it for a full minute. Just stared. Still as stone. Dwayne caught him one day. "What the hell are you sniffing?" he snapped, shoving the door shut. Shadow backed away, tail low. Another time, they walked past a teen who dropped something from his hoodie. Shadow picked up the scent fast and tugged toward him. Dwayne yanked. "Him back! Leave it!" he ordered. "We're not stopping." The boy glanced over nervously and hurried off. "Did you see that?" Madison asked later. Shadow was onto something. Dwayne shrugged. "False alert." Shadow looked up at her as if trying to say otherwise. The signs were growing. At night, Shadow would whimper in his sleep. He'd curl up tightly, ears twitching, paws shaking. No more peaceful rest, no more trust. Even the way he looked at Dwayne had changed. Before, it had been loyalty. Now, it was confusion, hurt, a question he couldn't ask. At a school demo, Shadow froze mid-command. The kids had clapped, but Dwayne's face turned red. He leaned in close and whispered, "You embarrass me again, I swear." Shadow looked away. Madison noticed it. After the demo, she knelt by Shadow and whispered, "You okay, buddy?" Shadow gently placed his head on her knee, just for a second, then stepped back. Later that week, an old man dropped his cane near the squad car. Shadow didn't bark. Instead, he whined, softly. Dwayne didn't even glance up, but Madison was watching. She crouched next to the dog. "You trying to say something?" she asked. Shadow's tail gave one slow wag. Something was off. Not just with Shadow, but with Dwayne, too. He was getting more tense, more irritable, snapping more, talking less. Then came the night they pulled over a black sedan with no plates. Dwayne told Shadow to sit, but the dog wouldn't. He stared at the trunk, unmoving. "Sit." "Shadow!" Dwayne growled. The dog barked once, sharp and loud. "You trying to make me look stupid?" Dwayne hissed, dragging him away. Minutes later, backup arrived. Inside the trunk, 3 stolen guns. Madison stared at Dwayne. He knew. Dwayne didn't. Meet her eyes. Lucky guess, but everyone could see. Shadow wasn't broken. He was trying to speak, trying to show the truth. Only no one wanted to listen. Yet, and deep inside, Shadow was waiting. Waiting for the moment someone finally would. Shadow had never broken a command, not once, until that night. That one moment that changed everything. It started as a routine call, a break-in at a small warehouse outside the city. Dispatch said it was probably just kids messing around, but Dwayne didn't like surprises. Shadow sat quietly in the back seat, eyes focused, ears perked. Dwayne spoke over his shoulder. "You know the drill. No funny business tonight." Shadow gave a soft bark, but it wasn't excitement, it was warning. A quiet one. They pulled up to the warehouse. Dim lights flickered inside. Dwayne stepped out, clipped on Shadow's lead, and moved in slow. Madison was behind them, hand on her radio. Inside, the place was half empty. Old crates, some shelves, broken furniture. Dwayne whispered, "Let's clear left." Shadow didn't move. He stared straight ahead, nose twitching. "I said left," Dwayne repeated, tugging the leash. Shadow growled low. Barely a sound. His body stiffened. "What's going on with him?" Madison asked. Dwayne hissed, "He's acting up again." Then Shadow did something no one expected. He pulled away from Dwayne. Hard. Broke formation. Bolted straight toward the back room. "Shadow, get back here!" Dwayne yelled. But Shadow didn't stop. Madison ran after him, heart racing. "We should follow him," Dwayne cursed under his breath and gave chase. They found Shadow standing in front of a locked door, barking like crazy. "Open that," Madison said. Dwayne frowned but kicked it open. Inside, 2 kids, maybe 11 or 12, hands tied, faces pale, gagged. They looked terrified. Madison rushed to them, freeing their hands. One boy was crying. "You're okay now. You're safe," she whispered. Dwayne just stood there, stunned. "He led us here," Madison said. He knew. Shadow didn't bark now. He sat beside the children, tail still, watching them closely. The older kid whispered, "The man who brought us here. He said he knew someone in the department. He said no one would come." Madison turned to Dwayne. "You hear that?" Dwayne didn't answer. Outside, paramedics arrived. The kids were taken away, but something hung heavy in the air, a weight no one could name yet. At the station later, the captain called a meeting. You all heard what happened. Shadow found those kids when no one else would. He disobeyed, but for the right reason. Lopez nodded. "He's not broken. He's smarter than we thought." But Dwayne wasn't clapping. He looked like he was trying to hide something. His hands trembled just slightly. Later, in the locker room, Madison approached him. "He disobeyed you, Dwayne, but he saved lives." "He's a dog," Dwayne muttered. "He doesn't get to make calls like that." Madison leaned in. He made the right call. That should matter. But Dwayne didn't reply. He slammed his locker shut and walked out. Shadow, lying nearby, lifted his head and watched him go. Over the next few days, everything changed. Officers started treating Shadow differently, respectfully. Even the captain said, "He's more than a tool. He's a partner." But Dwayne grew colder, more distant. At training, he ignored Shadow's signals. When Shadow alerted to something in a duffel bag during a drill, Dwayne snapped, "False alarm again?" But when Lopez checked the bag, he found 2 bags of stolen pills from an old bust. "You're kidding," he muttered. "He's never wrong." Shadow wagged his tail once. One afternoon, Madison found Shadow sitting alone in the corner of the garage. She sat beside him. "You did the right thing," she whispered. "Don't let him make you feel like you didn't." Shadow leaned into her gently. For a moment, he just wanted to stay there. But then he heard footsteps. "Dwayne, let's go," Dwayne snapped. Shadow didn't move. "I said let's go." But Madison stood up. "Maybe he doesn't trust you right now." Dwayne's eyes narrowed. "He's a dog." "No," she said quietly. "He's a partner. And maybe he sees something the rest of us missed." Dwayne said nothing. He just took the leash and pulled Shadow away. That night, back at Dwayne's apartment, Shadow was quiet. Too quiet. Dwayne poured himself a drink. "You embarrassed me back there," he muttered. "Made me look weak." Shadow lay still, watching. Then came a knock at the door. Dwayne froze. He looked out the peephole. 2 officers. He opened the door slowly. "Something wrong?" Lopez held up a folder. "Yeah, actually. We found something in your locker. Shadow's been trying to tell us. And now we're listening." Dwayne didn't move. Shadow walked up beside him and growled, low, steady, and that's when the truth finally began to unravel. Dwayne stood frozen, the weight of the folder heavy in his hands. Shadow growled low beside him, eyes fixed on the 2 officers. The room felt thick with tension, something no one could shake off. Lopez broke the silence. "We found this hidden in your locker." He slid out a small memory card from the folder. "A camera. It's got footage from the warehouse." Dwayne's heart pounded. He looked down at Shadow, who stayed alert, but calm. "Why would there be a camera?" Dwayne muttered, voice barely steady. Madison stepped forward, her eyes sharp. "Because someone didn't want the truth to get out." Lopez nodded, plugging the card into a laptop. The screen flickered to life. The video started simple. Shadows, moving in the warehouse, footsteps, crates shifting. But then the camera angle changed. It was hidden, placed low, giving a clear view of the back room. Dwayne leaned in. His breath caught. On the screen, a man entered. Not a random thief, but someone wearing a badge, a uniform. His face was partly hidden in shadow, but his movements were quick and deliberate. He opened the locked door, the same door Shadow had, led them to. The camera caught the kids inside, terrified, just as before. But then something worse. The man pulled out a small package, something wrapped tightly. He stuffed it into one of the kids' backpacks. "Smuggling drugs," Madison said quietly. "Right under our noses." Dwayne's fists clenched. "I had no idea." Shadow's growl deepened. Lopez paused the video. The man was planting evidence, setting those kids up. Dwayne's mind raced. Who could do something like that? Madison looked him dead in the eyes. "Someone you work with." The room went silent. Shadow's ears perked, sensing the weight of that truth. Suddenly, Dwayne's phone buzzed. A message flashed. "Meet me, now, outside, Urgent. He looked up. I have to go. Outside, the night was cold and still. Dwayne's breath misted as he scanned the empty parking lot. A figure stepped from the shadows. Dwayne, the voice was low, shaky. You don't know what you're involved in. Dwayne frowned. Who are you? The man hesitated, then pulled off his cap. It was Sergeant Miller, a trusted veteran on the force. Miller's eyes darted nervously. I'm sorry to do this, but I had to tell you. Dwayne stepped closer. Tell me what? Miller swallowed hard. There's a group inside the department, using police resources to cover up their crimes. Drugs, trafficking. They're dangerous. Dwayne's heart sank. Why show me this now? Because Shadow is the only one who saw through it. All. That dog's instinct saved those kids. Dwayne looked down at Shadow, who was sitting obediently by his side. Miller added, but they'll come after you if you dig too deep. Dwayne swallowed. What should I do? Trust Shadow. And be careful. Back inside the station, Dwayne replayed the footage again and again. The faces, the movements, the lies. It all pointed to a deeper conspiracy. He sat beside Shadow and whispered, You did the right thing. I was blind, but you showed me. Shadow wagged his tail faintly, eyes shining with trust. But Dwayne knew the battle was just beginning. The man in the video wasn't just a criminal. He was a cop. And Shadow's discovery could tear everything apart. He looked out the window, heart heavy but steady. Tomorrow we find the truth, he said softly. Shadow leaned against him, ready for whatever came next. The night was heavy, but Dwayne's heart was heavier. He looked at Shadow, who seemed alert, as if sensing what was coming. Tonight's the night, boy, Dwayne said softly. We're taking them down. The footage had revealed the truth. Corruption hiding behind the badge. And now, with the evidence in hand, Dwayne knew they had to act fast. Inside, the squad room, the tension was thick. Dwayne briefed the team, his voice steady but urgent. This is bigger than anything we've faced. We're not just busting street dealers. This goes deep. We need to be careful. One of the officers raised a hand. Are we sure about the backup? What if it leaks? Dwayne nodded. Only trusted people. No mistakes. Shadow sat by his side, ears twitching. Dwayne whispered, You ready, buddy? Shadow's eyes locked on his. It was like the dog understood everything. The danger, the mission, the stakes. The team geared up, checking radios and weapons. The air was thick with anticipation. Dwayne's phone buzzed again. Miller's message, Trust Shadow. That's all it said. But Dwayne knew Shadow was the key. The target was an old warehouse on the edge of town. Quiet now, but soon it would be chaos. As they approached, Shadow suddenly stopped, nose to the ground. Dwayne whispered, What is it, boy? Shadow growled low, then sprinted toward a side door, scratching at it furiously. Shadow, wait! Dwayne called, but the dog kept going. Suddenly, the door creaked open. Inside, a group of men hurried to hide packages and weapons. Dwayne's heart pounded. Team, move in! The officers stormed inside, shouting orders. But then, chaos exploded. Shots rang out. Dwayne ducked behind a crate as a bullet whizzed past. Shadow barked fiercely, chasing one of the men down a narrow corridor. Good boy, Shadow, Dwayne shouted, moving quickly to back him up. The suspect turned, pulling a gun. But Shadow was faster. The dog lunged, knocking the man to the ground before he could fire. Dwayne cuffed the man, breathing hard. You're done. The raid was brutal, tense, and fast. But Shadow's instincts saved lives more than once that night. After what felt like hours, the last suspect was in cuffs. The officers gathered, panting and shaken. Dwayne looked down at Shadow, who was panting but proud. Couldn't have done it without you, partner, Dwayne said, rubbing behind the dog's ears. Then, an officer approached with a folder. We found something else, Dwayne. Inside were records, documents proving who was really behind the cover-up. Names, dates, deals. It was the smoking gun. Dwayne stared at the papers. This changes everything. Suddenly, the room went quiet as a voice crackled over the radio. Command to all units, stand down. New orders coming in. Dwayne's stomach dropped. What now? Lopez looked grim. Looks like the department is trying to shut this down. Dwayne clenched his jaw. No, not this time. He turned to Shadow. We have to fight. For the kids. For justice. Shadow wagged his tail slowly, as if agreeing. The night had been a victory, but the real battle was just beginning. Dwayne knew one thing for sure. Shadow wasn't just a dog. He was the truth's guardian. And together, they'd expose the darkness no matter the cost. "We're not done yet," Dwayne whispered. Eyes fierce. Shadow leaned into him, ready to face whatever came next. The raid had shaken the entire department. Officers were still catching their breath. But the real fight was just beginning. Dwayne sat alone in the dimly lit room, staring at the evidence folder in his hands. Shadow lay quietly by his feet, sensing the weight of the moment. "What now?" "Shadow?" Dwayne whispered, his voice rough. "They want to bury this. Make us look like the bad guys." Shadow looked up, eyes full of trust. That dog had been by his side through everything. And now, more than ever, Dwayne needed him. The paperwork was damning. Names of high-ranking officers, dirty deals and lies meant to protect criminals instead of catching them. But the higher-ups had already started pushing back. The department's brass was trying to control the narrative, discrediting the evidence. "Dwayne, they're spinning this," Lopez said, her voice tight. "The media's getting confused. They say it's all hearsay." Dwayne slammed his fist on the table. "This isn't hearsay. It's truth. Shadow showed us that." Shadow whimpered softly, as if understanding the danger. Despite the pressure, Dwayne refused to back down. "I won't let them silence us. Not after everything Shadow did." His phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. "Be careful. They're watching." Dwayne's stomach twisted. That night, as he sat by the window, Shadow rested his head on Dwayne's knee. "You saved lives, buddy, but now you're a target too." The dog's steady breathing was the only comfort in a storm of uncertainty. Days passed, and the department's attempts to hush the scandal only grew louder. Dwayne noticed cold shoulders, hushed whispers behind his back, and orders that kept him off active cases. He confronted his captain. "Why am I being sidelined?" "I risked everything." The captain avoided eye contact. "Dwayne, you need to trust the process. Sometimes it's better to wait." Dwayne clenched his jaw. "Waiting means more people get hurt. More lies get buried." Shadow growled softly as if agreeing. That growl was a reminder that truth was alive, and justice needed a voice, even if that voice wasn't heard by many. One evening, Dwayne was called into internal affairs. "We need to talk about your conduct during the raid," the investigator said coldly. Dwayne's heart sank. "You mean Shadow's actions?" "They're questioning if Shadow acted appropriately, if you followed protocol." Dwayne looked down at Shadow, who sat silently beside him, tail wagging faintly, loyal as ever. "This isn't about protocol," Dwayne said quietly. "It's about courage. Shadow did what no one else dared." The room was silent except for the faint sound of Shadow's paws on the floor. Outside, news stories spun different versions of the raid. Some called Shadow a hero, others painted him as a rogue animal. Dwayne watched it all unfold, helpless. He took a deep breath. "I don't need the world to believe me. I just need to know Shadow is safe." Lopez came by with a sad smile. "People will remember Shadow, Dwayne, even if the department won't." Her words sparked a flicker of hope. Maybe, just maybe, the truth would find a way. One late night, Dwayne whispered to Shadow, "You're a hero without a voice, but I'll be yours." The dog looked up, eyes shining with a quiet strength that no words could capture. The fight was far from over, but one thing was clear. Shadow had exposed a darkness no one could ignore, and Dwayne would stand with him, no matter the cost. Together, they faced the silence, ready to be the voice that truth needed. The battle had taken its toll. Months of fighting the system, of sleepless nights and cold shoulders, had worn Dwayne and Shadow down. But through it all, the bond between them never wavered. Shadow remained by Dwayne's side, silent but strong, the brave dog who had turned on the darkness to protect what was right. One crisp morning, Dwayne sat beside Shadow in the quiet backyard of his home. The sun was just rising, casting a soft, golden light over the worn fur of the dog who had been his partner, his protector, and his friend. Shadow didn't move much anymore. His breaths were shallow, his body tired. Dwayne ran a gentle hand over his head, voice thick with emotion. "You did everything you could, buddy. You saved so many lives, including mine." Shadow's eyes met his, full of trust and love. In that moment, no words were needed. They shared a lifetime of memories. The chase, the danger, the moments where the world seemed like it might fall apart, but they held on together. Dwayne whispered, "I know it wasn't easy, Shadow. You had to do things no dog should ever have to do, but you were brave, the bravest." Tears slipped down Dwayne's cheeks. "I'm so sorry you had to carry that burden. I wish I could have made it easier for you." Shadow gave a small, tired wag of his tail. His eyes slowly closed, and the tension in his body softened. With one last, peaceful breath, Shadow rested his head on Dwayne's lap and let go. Dwayne stayed still, holding his friend's head close. "You're free now, Shadow. Free from pain, from fear, from everything." His voice cracked as he spoke. "You were more than a police dog. You were a hero without a voice, and I'll never forget you." Later that day, Dwayne gathered with a few close friends to honor Shadow. They shared stories of the dog who had saved lives, who had stood up when no one else could. "Shadow was more than a K9, Dwayne said quietly. "He was a beacon of hope in a dark time. He taught me about loyalty, courage, and truth." The memories flowed, of Shadow's sharp instincts, his gentle heart, and the moment he broke away from the handler to expose what no one else dared to face. One friend wiped a tear and said, "He showed us all what it means to be brave. Not just in action, but in spirit." Dwayne nodded. "He was my partner, and even now, when he's gone, his legacy lives on. I'll keep fighting, for Shadow, for justice." As the sun set, Dwayne looked up at the sky, feeling a quiet peace. Shadow had found rest at last, but the story of a dog who dared to stand up against darkness would never be forgotten, because sometimes the loudest voices come from the quietest heroes. And Shadow's courage still echoes, silent but unforgettable. Shadow's story reminds us that courage isn't always loud. Sometimes it's the quiet bravery of a loyal friend, standing up for what's right, even when it's hard. If this story touched your heart, please share it with others who believe in justice and hope. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell to hear more stories that celebrate the incredible bonds between humans and animals. What would you do if your loyal companion showed you a side of the world you never expected? Let me know in the comments below. Your thoughts mean a lot.